1 Samuel, and I've been practicing reading it, but some of the words are really hard, but I'll bash at it. 1 Samuel chapter 17. I'm just going to read about 11 verses, but I'll cover the whole chapter. Now the Philistines gathered together their armies to battle, and they were gathered together at Socoh, which belongs to Judah, and encamped between Socoh and Azekah and Ephes Dammim. And Saul and the men of Israel were gathered together and encamped in the vale of Elah, and set the battle in array against the Philistines. And the Philistines stood on the mountain at one side, and Israel stood on the mountain on the other side, and there was a valley between them. And there went out a champion out of the camp of the Philistines, named Goliath of Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span, about 9'6". And he had a helmet of brass upon his head, and he was clad with a coat of mail, and the weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels of brass, in English, a lot. And he had greaves of brass upon his legs, and a javelin of brass between his shoulders, and the staff of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and his spear's head weighed 600 shekels of iron, and his shield-bearer went before him. And he stood and cried unto the armies of Israel, and he said unto them, Why are you come out to set your battle in array? Am I not a Philistine, and you servants of Saul? Choose a man for you, and let him come down to me. If he is able to fight me and kill me, then we will be your servants. But if I prevail against him and kill him, then shall you be our servants and serve us. And the Philistines said, I defy the armies of Israel. This day give me a man, that we may fight together. And when Saul and all Israel heard these words of the Philistines, they were dismayed and greatly afraid. They were having a bad day. Verse 16, and the Philistine drew near morning and evening, and presented himself 40 days, and took his stand. Israel had 40 bad days on a run. Have you had a bad day today? Have you had many bad days this week? I remember years ago now, I went to a conference with my oldest daughter, a Christian conference for the weekend, and we shared a room. And I woke up on a Saturday morning, and I said, This is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. And do you know what the response was? Oh, yeah. That was it. I thought to myself, she's not spiritual as I am. So that's all she said. Oh. Now, it could have had something to do with the fact that she was heavily pregnant with my youngest grandchild, and she hadn't slept all night. She'd been tossing and turning all night, and she didn't feel like saying, This is the day the Lord has made. Well, anyway, by the end of that day, I had a lovely day, and the last meeting finished at 10 o'clock in the night, and the preacher gave an announcement which shook me to the core. He said, Don't forget, the clocks go forward 1 hour tonight. Well, when I heard that, I was alarmed. I thought I'm going to lose an hour's sleep. And you know what? I worried so much about losing an hour's sleep that it kept me awake. And I finally dropped off to sleep at 5 o'clock in the morning. The alarm went at 7:30, and I woke up and I said, Oh, I feel terrible. I feel awful. I don't know how I'm going to get through this day. And I thought I mustn't be selfish, so I said to my daughter, How are you feeling, love? She said, This is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. I went, Oh. But you know what? On our worst day, it's still the day the Lord has made. You know, whatever trials we're going through, this is the day the Lord has made. Nothing changes. God is still on the throne on my bad days or my good days. God is on the throne, and he will remember his own. His promise is true. He'll not forget you. God is still on the throne. You're still a child of God. There's still no condemnation for those who are in Christ. Your names are still written in heaven. He is still preparing a place for you, and he's still coming back for you. And that is true on our worst day. Now, Israel is having a bad day, because Goliath came out with this challenge, choose a man to come and fight me. And they fled. And he did it for 40 days. So they had 40 bad days on a run. Have you ever had 40 bad days in a run? I mean, one day is bad enough, isn't it? Having a bad day one day. On the worst day of our life, God is still on the throne. In Isaiah chapter 6, Isaiah is in the temple, and it's during the time of King Uzziah's death. A good king in Israel had done a lot of good for his people, but he had died. And Isaiah writes, in the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord sitting on a throne, high and lifted up, with the train of his robe filling the temple. People are grieving at the loss of their king. But you know, God was still on the throne. And you know, through life, we lose loved ones. We endure terrible situations. I've endured terrible situations in the last 10 years. But you know, God is still on the throne, no matter how bad my day is. Do you remember the story of John the Apostle? He was exiled to the Isle of Patmos. And he was an old man. And it tells us in some commentaries that he was exiled and sentenced to hard labor in the quarries. Now, John the Apostle must have had some bad days on the Isle of Patmos. No doubt about it, isn't it? But he doesn't tell us about any of them. But what he does do, he tells us about a good day. He says, I was in the Spirit on the Lord's day, and I heard a voice that sounded like a trumpet. And when you read the book of Revelation, he speaks about a lamb on the throne. Worthy is the lamb that was slain, who was worthy of honor and glory and praise. And he speaks about a crowd, 10,000 times 10,000 upon 1,000, worshipping the lamb. And where is the Lamb of God? On the throne. John the Apostle is exiled. He's going through suffering. He's separated from his brothers and sisters in the Lord. But he's able to see the situation up there. Like Job. Job is having lots of bad days. You go through the book of Job, and he's constantly having bad days. But we know what's going on in heaven. God was in charge. Everything that happened to Job was ordained by God, and he was in charge. And the devil couldn't go any further. So if you're having a bad day, it can't get worse than what God allows. Do you know, in these 40 days, not one of these Israelites woke up in the morning and said, this is the day the Lord has made. Not one of them. And in this chapter, up until verse 26, God isn't mentioned at all. There's no mention of God. The only conversation they got is Goliath. They talked about their problems. They talked about how big Goliath was. And they talked about Saul's offer. King Saul said, I'll make you rich if you take the challenge. He offered his soldiers, I'll give you my daughter in marriage, which meant they could be part of the royal family. And then Saul said, your family will be tax-free forever. That was the conversation. Looking for solutions to solve their problems. And not once did they see God. They didn't know that God is bigger than 946. They didn't know that God was bigger than all their problems. And whatever problems we've got in life, God is bigger. It's a song, and I know you don't know it. Do you know what? I'm going to sing it to you. Bigger than all my problems, bigger than all my fears, he is bigger than any mountain that I can or cannot see. Bigger than all my questions, bigger than anything. My God's bigger than any mountain that I can or cannot see. And you don't know it, but you do know that God is bigger than any problem, any question, anything you're going through. God is bigger. Our God is a great, big God. And what's that song? I'm always quoting it. Our God, he's known me. You can all say that. And he's loved me since before the world began. Why, if I'm having a bad day, do I forget this wonderful truth that God is on the throne? And he's called me and you personally. He's taken you out of darkness into his marvelous light. Instead of being in Adam, you're now in Christ. On your worst day, you're a child of God. But they talked about the problems. You think of all people, the Israelites would have realized that they were descended from Abraham. They were the chosen race. They were given the laws and the rituals, the prophets and the priests. They were living in the promised land that God promised them. And yet, somehow or other, when they had a problem, they talked about the problem, not about God. Do you remember this? Another song you don't know, I'm sure of it. 12 spies went to spy in Canaan. 10 were bad, 2 were good. Do you know it? I can't believe it. You know the story when God said, go and take the land? And 12 spies went to spy out the land. 10 came back with a bad report, and 2 came back with a good report. The 10 saw the giants, tough and tall, and the 2 saw that God was in it all. Do you want me to sing it for you? I can't remember the tune. I can sing for... Oh, never mind. The 10 people saw the giants, and they came back to the people and gave a bad report. They said, there's giants in the land, and we're like grasshoppers. 10 of them said it. But 2 spies, Joshua and Caleb, he said, we can do it. With God, we can do it. Because in Joshua and Caleb's eyes, God was bigger than the giants. But in the other 10 spies, no, their problems was too big for God. And they weren't in the mood for getting up in the morning and saying, this is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. We should be able to say that every day. Every day we wake up. When you wake up in the morning, the mercies of the Lord. Somebody said this morning, are new every morning. You got brand new mercies every morning. Wow. And you know, God's people, the other scriptures, and yet all they talked about was the problems. But you know, in verses 12 to 19, you read about David being sent to the battlefront to take provisions, food for his 3 older brothers who were in the battle. Because in them days, it was the family's responsibility to supply their soldiers with food. And David went along, and he gave the food to his brothers. And at the very moment David was in the battle situation, Goliath came forth with his challenge. And the people fled. I know this is the first time that David speaks in this chapter. In fact, it's the first time he speaks in the Bible. And this is what David says. Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God? For David, the honor of God was the chief important thing in his life. He's defying the armies of the living God. What an impression the world was having when they see Christians running about to and fro. Where is your God? Like Pharaoh. When Moses came to Pharaoh and said, thus saith the Lord of hosts, let my people go. Who is this God? I don't know him. An invisible God of slaves? Didn't think much of it at all. Just like Goliath, he didn't think much of God. But you know, from verse 26 onwards, 9 times David talks about the Lord. 9 times you read the Lord this, God that, the Lord this. And before that, all you had was the problem. But David wasn't talking about the problem, he was talking about God. And David was able to say to Saul, let no man's heart faint on account of Goliath. Your servant will go and fight him. Where did David get the courage from? He was a little dot. You know, David was a man who dared to believe that God is bigger than 9'6". And he knew that song, Bigger Than All My Problems, even if you don't. He may have had a different tune, but he knew the song. Now, do you think he had discouragement? And you know what discouraged him? His brothers. They were angry with David. They weren't angry with King Saul for not taking up the challenge. They weren't angry with the giant. They were angry at David. He had brought him food. What are you doing here? Who's looking after the sheep? You're arrogant. It's not very encouraging. And it's true, our family can be a discouragement. Sometimes our own family can be the means of discouraging us. King Saul, did he discourage David? Yes. He said, you're not able to do it. You're but a youth. Goliath is a man, he's been a warrior from his youth. You're not able to do it. And what does David do? He gives his testimony. He has an up-to-date testimony. Have we got an up-to-date testimony? Very often the pastor will say to us, anybody want to share what God has done for them this week? No response. Anybody want to share what God has done for them 50 years ago? And they'll come forward then and say that when they were saved. But David had an up-to-date testimony. And he was during his employment, doing his work. He goes on to say, he said to Saul, I was tending my father's sheep when a lion and a bear came and took the lamb out of the flock. I went after him and I attacked him and rescued it out of his mouth. And when he rose against me, I caught him by his beard and struck him and killed him. Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, seeing he hath defied the armies of the living God. He can't help talking about God. And David said, the Lord, who delivered me out of the paw of the lion and out of the paw of the bear, he will deliver me out of the hand of this Philistine. How many times? And there's more times he mentions God. Instead of talking about the problem, David is talking about God. There's another song we don't know. I can feel it in my bones. Let's talk about Jesus, the King of Kings is he, the Lord of Lords supreme, through all eternity. The great I am, the way, the truth, the life, the door. Let's talk about Jesus more and more. You don't know it. You know it. Oh, lovely. Yeah. Now, how often do we talk about Jesus compared to how often we talk about our problems? Problems are real, but we can talk about Jesus because he's Lord of Lords. He's King of Kings. He's loved us and he's given himself for us. God spared not his only son, but delivered him up for us. And we worry about our problems. Ephesians 1 tells us that we've been blessed with every spiritual blessing. Now, we haven't got every problem, have we? But we've got every spiritual blessing. More than enough to combat our problems. And David talked about God constantly. Verse 40, and David took up a stick, and he went to the brook, and he found 5 smooth stones. Now, people try and make illustrations of that. 5 smooth stones. The 5 points of Calvinism. Or Goliath had 5 brothers, but I don't know. But anyway, he had 5 smooth stones, and I don't know why there was 5. But he did have 4 brothers, so. Anyway, David is about to face Goliath. And Goliath said to David, am I a dog that you come up to me with sticks? And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. Come here, he said. I'll give your flesh to the birds of the air and the beasts of the field. It's not getting easier, is it? His brothers are upset with him. King Saul doesn't trust him. And now Goliath is making him small. Nothing but discouragement. But you know David's secret? In 1 Samuel verse 30, it tells us a time when David was distressed, and it says he encouraged himself in the Lord. And that's what we need to do. Encourage ourselves. How do we do that? Read his word daily. Spend time in prayer. Not just say a few words or a lot of words. Spend time in his presence. Spend time in fellowship with Jesus. And then let's talk about Jesus, the King of, do all these things and encourage yourself in the Lord. And that's what David is doing. And what did David say to Goliath? He says, you come against me with a sword and a spear and a javelin. Well, if that was me, I'd be off. I'd be off with just a sword. Sword, spear. But I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. And he goes on in verse 46, this day the Lord will hand you over to me, and I will strike you down and cut off your head today, and I will give the carcasses of the Philistines. And today I will give the carcasses of the Philistines' army to the birds of the air and the beasts of the earth, that the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. Have you been taking a note of how many times God is mentioned? And all those who are gathered here, that they will know that the Lord doesn't deliver by spear or the sword. The Lord saves the battle by his own power. He will give you into my hands. Well, you know the end of the story. David prevailed. What a mess. What a bad day. What a hopeless situation. But God turned it around. Do you know, it almost seems foolish. A young lad with a sling and a stone. That's all it took. But one man with God is a majority. They had the victory that day. Afterwards, when you read about David, he had still had many bad days. That wasn't the end of the story. He had many bad days. He was treated like an outlaw. Saul hounded him, tried to kill him. And David had many bad days. But there certainly was a good day. And God, that was the answer to the situation. If only the people of Israel realized that at the beginning of this battle, the Lord is in charge. And there's a greater David. And to many people, the cross is foolishness. A Jewish rabbi dying on a cross is foolishness to the world. A stumbling block to the Jew. But it's God's eternal plan of salvation. And even though it seems foolish, It's God's plan. And you know, our problem, we were dead in our trespasses and sins in which we once walked, according to the course of this world, according to the prince of the power of the air, of the spirit that is now working in the sons of disobedience. And among them too we all once lived in the lust of our flesh, indulging in the desires of the flesh and of the mind, and we were by nature children of wrath, even as the rest. But verse 4 tells us, but God. The story of Samuel chapter 17 is, but God. The story for our lives when we are dead in trespasses is but God. But God, because of his great love, because of his mercy, has made us alive in Christ. It's of grace, not of ourselves. And it goes on to say in that chapter that we've been brought near through the blood of the cross. That's our salvation. But God. Pharaoh would have succeeded, but God was bigger than Pharaoh. Goliath would have succeeded, but God was bigger than Goliath. And Satan would have succeeded, but God is bigger than Satan. He's bigger than all our problems. He's bigger than all our bad days. And you may have bad days to come, but you know, on your worst day, your worst nightmare, God is still on the throne, and he will remember his own. His promise is true. He'll not forget you. Think of the Apostle Paul. Have you read his letters? Every city he went to, he was either stoned or caused a riot, imprisoned, beaten. He had many bad days. But you know, and that could be a lot for a lot of us. But you know, that good days come in. And if you're a child of God, then in a way, every day is a good day because you're part of God's eternal plan. Amen. We can sing our last song, is it?